Good evening. My name is Benjamin Magnet, and it is my privilege to welcome you to the 2023 Death and Taxes edition of the Spirits of Franklin. The Franklin Historical Society has decided to dedicate this night to my late grandmother, Nancy Stanley Magnet, who was a foundational piece of the creation of the first Spirits of Franklin in 2018. My grandmother was a woman who loved history, but even more so, she loved Franklin history. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on 8 notable people from Franklin's past, and we want it to be educational, but also fun. So thank you for coming. Again, welcome, and please enjoy.
Switchboard for over 52 years, connecting calls and Franklin folks. I sometimes had to listen in just to make sure the line was clear, of course. I heard all sorts of news and stories, neighbors calling neighbors. Little children would call me and say, I want to talk to Grandma. I'd have to know which one was their grandmother. And I always did know which one was their grandmother, and I always knew where to find her. There were business calls to the store, to the sawmill, to the down park, and of course to the governor's office. There were emergency calls for an accident, or a fire, or a doctor, sometimes even for death. I didn't like those calls. I didn't like calls about taxes either. There were cheerful, happy calls from friends and family, sometimes about weddings and babies, hopefully in that order. Calls just for a visit. Summertime in Franklin is a good time for a visit. Franklin folks are always busy, but they always take time for one another. I think tonight would be a good time to visit a few of Franklin folks, hear their stories. Ever hear of Carmine Marsh? A local farm boy, a Civil War veteran, a businessman. He can be quite busy. I'm going to have to track him down. I heard there's a good crowd at the town hall, and I think that's where he'll be.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I see from the ladies here that fashion has changed considerably since my days here. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Carmi Lathrop Marsh, and I led an interesting, rewarding, and worthwhile life. I was born on August 4th of 1842 to Lathrop and Lucy Chadwick Marsh, and grew up on the Marsh Pond Farm on the southeast side of Franklin Pond, along with my 4 sisters, Gracia, Carolyn, Miranda, and Jane. That farm is now Lake Carmi State Park. When I was 20 years old, I, with some of my friends, went to Swanton to enlist in Company K of the 13th Vermont Infantry. I was elected second lieutenant, and we went with Company K to Brattleboro to escort the 12th Vermont Regiment to Washington, D.C. In December, Company K arrived at camp in Fairfax Courthouse, Virginia. The weather had been quite bad during our trip, and many of our men, myself included, became ill. My illness turned into pneumonia and meningitis, and it was months before I recovered, by the grace of God and the care of a compassionate Southern widow, Mrs. Mary Wilcoxon. When I recovered sufficiently to do so, I returned to Vermont and my home, as the doctors had told me it would be some time, possibly even years, until I would be fully recovered. I hated to leave my comrades, but I would have been more of a burden to them than a help. It was 2 to 3 years before I fully recovered and was able to resume operation of the family farm. At this endeavor, I was quite successful, and profitably so. After a time, I was able to purchase a large interest in the Kendall Spavin Cure business, then located at Enosburg Falls, along with Olin Merrill, and soon it was a growing and prosperous business. Sometime later, Moses Purley, a young traveling salesman, purchased a quarter share in the company. That company produced and distributed a liniment for the treatment of bone spavin, an ailment causing lameness in horses. Are your horses lame? Then I recommend Kendall's Spavin Cure. Other Enosburg businesses in which I had a financial interest were the Missisquoi Flouring Mill, where we employed local people to turn local grain into flour, a grain and feed store on Main Street, and the Gladden and Marsh Box Factory. I also owned the Trotting Park on Orchard Street, and with Mr. A.W. Woodard, I built the first brick block, which became known as the Purley Block. As president of the Spavin Cure Company, I was able to influence community improvements and donated freely to projects like the Opera House in Enosburg and the Civil War Monument in Franklin. I like to think I made a difference to those communities in my lifetime. After the war, I married the beautiful Miss Della Pelton of Highgate, whom I had met when we were enlisting in 1862. I'm quite sure that it had been love at first sight. She and I had 2 beautiful children, Lucy Ellis and Lathrop Lyman. I was quite busy running the family farm, but I was able to find time to represent Franklin in the legislature in 1878 and was Franklin County Senator in 1886. Under Governors Barstow and Pingree, I was also Judge Advocate General for the state of Vermont. In 1888, the surviving members of the 13th Regiment of Vermont Volunteers formed an association which met annually for many years. Some of those reunions were held at Gettysburg. The members saw fit to name me president of that association. The history of the 13th Regiment of Vermont Volunteers was written and then published in 1910. It was a large book. That history was written by my good friend Ralph Sturdivant and co-authored by myself. It includes accounts, anecdotes, backgrounds, and photographs of the regiment. The book is a fitting tribute to the good men of Vermont, both living and dead, who risked their very lives to protect their nation. In 1898, 30-plus years after my near death in Virginia, I searched for and found the kind widow who had nursed me back to being recovered enough to return home. I learned that she had remarried, and her name was now Mary Wilcoxon Seligman. But her second husband had also passed away, leaving her nearly penniless. I visited her numerous times, often accompanied by my wife Della, daughter Lucy, and granddaughter Ruth. I also sent her a quarterly check until her death in 1902. In September of 1910, a Civil War monument, which I had gifted the town, that monument right there, was dedicated in the park in Franklin. On it was a tribute to the 150 fine young Franklin men who risked their lives by volunteering. In the fall of 1910, at the 21st biennial session of the General Assembly, the representative from Franklin, a Mr. Reuben M. Toll, introduced a bill, number 257, to rename Franklin Pond, or Silver Lake, to become Lake Carmine. This was approved and enacted on November 9, 1910. That was really quite an honor. On December 29, 1910, I passed from this life after battling cancer. Benjamin Franklin said, "In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. With all the properties I owned, I certainly paid my fair share of taxes. In Virginia, I had cheated death. But in the end, he caught up with me." Oh my. Where has the time gone? I really must be leaving now. Thank you, and good night.
I do hope Mr. Marsh has time to admire the Civil War monument at Veterans Park. Every Memorial Day, Franklin has a parade, and at the end, gathers around the monument with a pretty good-sized crowd. Town Hall has a pretty good-sized crowd tonight, too. Reminds me of my retirement party. I had over 125 people come to my retirement party over at the old Grange Hall. That was pretty special when they all showed up. I was quite surprised. Ina Glidden was there playing the piano at my party. She was so good. She was the church organist at the East Franklin Church, too. I remember she was always in motion. Busy woman. I wonder how Ina is doing. I should check on her, see if she's got time for a visit.
Even after all these years, I still honk the horn every time I go around a curve. You can't be too careful on these back roads. Good evening, Franklin. For those of you who don't remember me, my full name is Ina Viola Chamberlain Prouty Glidden. Doesn't that have a nice ring to it? Ina Viola Chamberlain Prouty Glidden. I was born on the farm of my grandfather, Edwin Prouty. He was a well-known pastor. My parents were Edward H. and Marion G. Whitney Chamberlain, but most people called my mother Minnie. I attended school at the Prouty Schoolhouse, which was located on the corner of the Middle Road and the Gallup Road, which was very close to home. Lucky for me, I only had to walk uphill one way. I then went on to graduate from the Franklin Academy, which was a very fine school. I loved school and learning. I suppose that is why I became a teacher. I was fortunate to teach in the Hubbard School out on the Gore Road here in Franklin, right near where Brian Barnum, one of my great-grandsons, now lives. In those days, most women gave up teaching when they got married. Doesn't that just seem foolish today? Fortunately, I was still able to play the organ at the East Franklin United Church after I was married. And I did so for over 50 years, but we'll come back to that. On July 25th, 1912, I married Howard Charles Glidden. That's 111 years ago, last week. We were soon blessed with 2 children, Richard and Marion. They both married and had children of their own. Marion had a son named Richard Toof, and Richard had 2 daughters, Shirley, who grew up to marry Walter Barnum, and Dorothy, who married Stanley Lothian. It warms my heart that Dorothy still remembers that I wrote a poem for her on the occasion of her engagement to Stanley. Dorothy's son Mike, along with his wife Joan, live on the farm where I spent my entire life. I am so proud that so many of our descendants have stayed in Franklin and continue to work hard, making it a good place to live and raise children. Speaking of grandchildren, some of my fondest memories are of the time I spent with them. On Saturday evenings, I would take them to the movies in Enosburg, and we always found time to stop and visit with friends. Those were happy times. Franklin County had everything you needed. None of this running to Burlington for everything. Oh, I did like to stay busy. Over the course of 50 years, I was a correspondent for 3 newspapers: the Enosburg Standard, the Burlington Free Press, and the St. Albans Messenger. And then there was the Franklin Grange and the Franklin County Pomona Grange. I was a member and pianist for both of them. That's not all. Remember, I like to stay busy. I served as an auditor for the town of Franklin for 16 years and was the correspondence secretary for the Franklin High School alumni for 10 years. You know, some very fine people graduated from that Franklin High School, like that Hugh Gates out there. About the time I lost my beloved husband to a lingering illness, I was elected to the Vermont House of Representatives twice. Once in 1948, and then again in 1952. Those were such rewarding years. I truly loved representing Franklin and also being a member of the Order of Women Legislators and Franklin County Republican Women. That was quite an honor. For those young people in the audience, in 1948, women had only been allowed to vote for 28 years. And here I was, representing Franklin as a member of the Vermont House of Representatives. And there were 5 other women from Franklin County, too. In fact, in 1949, there were 24 women in the Vermont House. And by 1953, there were 52. Even having lost my husband so early, I still led a happy and satisfying life, full of good work and family. There's nothing so certain as death and taxes, I suppose. A lot of young people called me Gammy, not just the relatives. I so enjoyed the children and grandchildren. You know, I always got along with young people. That came in handy as a teacher and at church. Even in my later years, I stayed busy. I loved crocheting gifts for all the new babies. I kept up many correspondences, kept track of the genealogy of just about everyone in Franklin, served on the Curbs Hospital Auxiliary, and especially enjoyed puzzles. My favorite puzzle was a wooden one of George Washington. It was made by a family friend, and it was especially difficult to put together. I always did love a challenge, you know. Oh, I said I would tell you more about my organ playing. It wouldn't be enough just to say I loved music. I played the piano and organ all my life. In fact, playing the organ was really the last thing I did on this earth. On October 29, 1967, I began feeling ill while playing the organ at the East Franklin United Church and had to be taken to the hospital and was not to return. Oh well, at least I can say I went out on a high note. Well, it seems I'm running out of time. See you later, alligators.
cats are getting hungry. I heard this place called Amazon where you can order cat food and they will deliver it in 2 days. Why in the world would I wait 2 days? I can just call up Oscar Riley. He'll bring it right up. Let's see how Oscar's doing tonight.
Well, hello there. It's nice to see so many people came out tonight. I've been out delivering groceries and I'm just taking a little break. I'm on my way to stop by Ruth Tooth. Heard she needs some milk for her cat. My name is Oscar Riley, and I was born here in Franklin, July 12th, 1902. I grew up here in Franklin. 1902 was apparently a popular year. There were several notable people here in Franklin that were born that year. There was Stanley McDermott, probably a lot of you know him, or knew him. Dolph Dewing, probably quite a few of you called him Grant. There was Fred Coulomb. He lived over on Pigeon Hill Road there and was married to Red, Edna Coulomb. She played the organ, talking about playing the organ. Guy Hubbard, he was a banker, well known in this area. Probably a lot of you did business with him. Then there was Wilfred Rainville, that rascal. Yeah, those of us who were already up in heaven couldn't believe it. The day Wilfred arrived, when the smoke from his pipe cleared, we saw St. Peter welcoming him through the pearly gates of heaven. Yeah. I grew up here with 3 siblings. My brother Winfred, my brother Fay, and my sister Bernice. Probably some of you knew of Winfred. His daughter, Martha Jane Umstead, was later the town clerk here in town. My brother Fay ran a farm for a while over on State Park Road and later worked for me in the store for many years. Many of you probably knew Fay. And my sister Bernice. She married Winslow Gates. Years later, when I grew up, I married Doris Toll. And we had 2 daughters, Marilyn and Shirley, who married a Macy. You might have known her. She was a school teacher. Several of you probably had her as a school teacher. My first occupation, well, there were 2. In 1926, I bought what used to be called the Powell store. It was over the brook there next to the sweet shop. Don't look for it, it's gone. But back in that day, you didn't just go in the grocery store and pick out what you wanted. You went in with your list and you handed your list, and those of us working in the store would go get your groceries and put them together and hand them off to you. And you might pay, or you might put it on credit. So we ran the Powell store for years and years. And then about 1952, we moved up the street. You see the grand opening right over here? That was 1952 when we moved up the street to where the present day location of the general store is. And we eventually changed the name to O.H. Riley Company. See my picture here? I was looking for the picture of the store. The store looked a bit different back then. See, at that time, we had a couple of apartments up there. So it was like a 2.5-story building. And we had one big apartment over the main part of the store. And over the other side, we had another apartment. So we always had people around us. Well, getting getting back to the store, and these days, I hear people buy a lot of things online. That was nothing new. Back in the day when I ran the store, we had customers who called up. They just told us what they wanted. We made a list. We picked out their items. We bagged them. Sometimes they stop by and they pick up their groceries. Sometimes, like today, we deliver it. Like Mrs. Rainville up there on Morse's Line. She didn't drive a car. Wilfred often drove by, and I probably could have caught him and given him the groceries, but anyway, so that was one of the services that we provided, was we delivered the groceries to people, especially those who didn't drive or shut-ins. Another thing we did was, well, as you realize, back in the day when I started business, not long after I started the Powell Company, the Great Depression hit, and people lost trust in the banks. So even years later, decades later, people didn't always have a bank account. So they might come in, bring me the cash, and I'd write a check if they had to send off to pay a bill. We just write a check, hand it over to them, and they'd mail it off. It was just one more of the services that we provided. And as for buying on credit, people paid when they could. We didn't worry too much about that. And the store was a little bit different. We had big windows in the front. You saw all of our ads in the windows. And during the holidays, you might see a mural up there, especially for Christmas time. We loved putting the murals up. So we got to know the store. The store was a little bit different too. When we moved in 1952, we put in shopping carts so people could get their own groceries. So they go up and down the aisle with their grocery carts and fill their grocery carts. People in town did all their grocery shopping here. They didn't have to go to other towns. And they could get anything there. They could get cold cuts, they could get meat, milk, eggs, all their groceries, hardware, plumbing, shoes, and clothes. We had one little tyke over in school, noontime. He came in because he had a hole, the side of his sneaker was all busted out. And his mother had told him, at noontime, go up to the store and get yourself a new pair of shoes, sneakers, and put them on the credit. So he came up, tried on a few pair of shoes. Of course, his sock was a little bit dirty, but he put on his new pair of shoes, he found a pair, put them on the credit, and he off to recess he went. We knew everybody in town. It wasn't just a place for buying your groceries. It was a place for exchanging information. A lot of gossip got exchanged there. We had a big potbelly stove and people would come and gather. But it was a place to exchange information. For example, births and deaths. If somebody was sick, if somebody was hurt, if a family wanted prayers for a family member, they might come in and tell us. Or they might leave a note and leave it on the cash, near the cash register on the counter. So people would see it as they were going through. It was an exchange of information and a gathering place for people. We knew everybody in town. My daughter, Marilyn, knew all the children. One day, either Andy or Imogene Rainville came in. They've got a boatload of kids up there on the hill. And most of them are redheads. And one of the younger boys came in with either Andy or Imogene. Cute as a button, little redhead. And he came in, and Marilyn looks down and says, "Would you like a little treat?" Well, that little redhead didn't know the meaning of treat, except following his father around in the barn, and when his father would treat a cow with a syringe and a needle that long. So we had, as you might know, there are two things that are certain in life. There's death and taxes. Well, my time came in 1972, and I'm laid to rest right over there in the Franklin Cemetery, next to my wife, Doris. And taxes. A lot of people probably didn't know or forgot or didn't realize that way back in time, farmers used to have to list all of their cattle and equipment and whatever for property tax purposes, just like the businesses often have to list their items. And you know, there were several businesses here in town. There was my store, the sweet shop, the East Franklin store. Way back, there was another store next to Dick Wright's. There was Dick Wright's. There was Benjamin Sawmill or East Franklin. There were a few businesses. So when someone got the idea that the farmers shouldn't have to list their property, their cattle anymore, well, that didn't go over so big for those of us with businesses, because that meant we might get taxed more. But since most of the customers in town were farmers, we couldn't say much. So that was one of the changes in the tax system that a lot of people don't know about, either because they weren't around or it didn't impact them, but it had a huge impact on us. Well, anyway, you forgive me because I keep thinking about the list of things that I have to do and that I have to get to Route 2. But there's more that I wanted to say. But anyway, I'm just going to run along and see what Ruth Toof is up to. And thank you all for coming out. And thanks for stopping by my store.
Such good service, waiting 2 days. I almost think that Oscar probably paid a little bit more in taxes than that Jeff Bezos guy, but I'm not sure about that. My cats are going to be very happy. Take pretty good care of the cats. And my friend Lucille Gates, she has a few more cats than I do. And she's out of town, so May Gates is supposed to be taking care of Lucille's cats, but I'm not sure how that's going. May's quite busy. She's been preparing for town meeting, but maybe I should check in with May just to make sure that she's keeping an eye on everything.
Well, hi Becky. I'm not surprised to see you here at town meeting. I'm sure you have an issue to bring up. I hope you let me speak first before you get them all riled up. Oh, well, so many people out here today. I see Dick and Kelly. Of course, you know, Dick moderates, and Oscar and Faye. I wonder who's watching the store. I'm sure it's probably Marilyn. I see Lenny Woods here. Yeah, Dorothea Patton. I bet Bunny drove them down. Of course, you know, Lucille can't be here. She was out of town, and then I wasn't doing a good job, so she had to come back to watch the cats. And, I must say, it's very nice to be able to sit here for a moment. It's been a busy time at our household. You know, the weekly card game was at our house this week, and we just left the tables up because then Marjorie Dewing came back from abroad, and she did her latest slideshow. A very cultural event. We were very lucky here to have her. She always shows up in full attire. And Mayor Priscilla brought those cupcakes with fudge topping. Lucille made that divinity fudge. That was great. And well, I don't know what you're doing tonight, Becky, after all this, but you know, I'm having a little soiree at the house, I want to invite the new family that's come in. They're Eugenia and Nathaniel Mormon. They've come in, they're logged in the woods behind me, and they're kind of bohemian. I think they're a great fit for Franklin. I want to give them a warm welcome. You know, he's the new editor for the Courier, and he's a Harvard grad, you know. So I'm quite excited to have him here, and like I said, a warm welcome. Oh, it's public comment time. Excuse me, you can have it later. Mr. Moderator, I have a little request I'd like to make of the taxpayers of Franklin. It might cost a little in taxes, it's not going to kill you, but you know, Ray Heflin, you know, who painted that beautiful curtain in the town hall, and Almond Richard, we've started a historical society, and we've recently borrowed $5,000 from the Eastford National Bank, and we bought that cabin out on the Hannah Road from Dr. Judd, and well, we'd like to move that up and put it on a little piece of land that I've dedicated on the farm, and we are collecting some bigger items. We've got a spinning wheel, we have a pump organ, we have a rope bed, and we're going to put it in there. We're going to advertise it in the summer schedule of events, and we've talked to the school, and the kids are going to do some school trips, and then I have volunteers that are going to sit there on Sunday. It'll be open from 1 to 3, especially for the lake people to come and visit. But it's going to be quite a project. It's going to take quite a team of horses to get it up there. And oh, Harrison Wright, what, you'll move it? Well, thank you very much. Stepping up to the plate like every good man should. I certainly do appreciate it. I think that's pretty much everything. You know, I hope you support this venture. There's a lot to say about Franklin. Some things we shouldn't. You know, but I also want to take the opportunity to thank everyone. The Finian Raid was a big success. Well, the reenactment was a big success. And I also want to thank you for allowing me to, again, use the school grounds for the overflow on the horse show I've been doing for a couple years. You know, it's become quite a prestigious event. We've had jumpers and trotters, and you know, I do love horses, so that was wonderful. So I'll thank you very much. I think you have some more issues to deal with, and I'm going to get my way back home. Thank you. So the glasses are a prop, but they're mine, and they're needed. I am Suzanne Hull Cassavan, and I'm very honored to be able to have played my grandmother. May Evelyn Fullington was born July 20th, 1899, to Charles Harrington Fullington and Ella Badger Fullington in Cambridge, Vermont. Their homestead is now what you may see the 1829 antique barn. May's mother died when she was just 4, and there were other children, and her father was a farmer. So May was sent to live her school months with her aunt in Burlington, and therefore attended Burlington High School, and then attended UVM to receive her teaching certificate. At some point, I believe in Burlington, she did meet Rodney Dow Gates, who will always be referred to as R.D. Gates, and then was her future husband. May taught in several schools, traveling by train back to Cambridge to be with a family in the summer. Eventually, in 1922, she landed in Franklin. She married R.D. Gates, the great-great-grandson of Paul Gates, the first Gates to reside in Franklin. R.D. was a farmer. He had a respectable dairy farm. As you come into Franklin down that big hill, he owned that property, and there was a beautiful, they called it a Dutch barn at the bottom of the hill, which is now gone. Together they had 2 children, R.D. Jr., who died at 6 of spina bifida, a huge tragedy to my grandmother, and then my mother, Sally Gates, was born. May loved music, and she shared that love with R.D., and together they were in a traveling town band along with Elton Pratt, Urban Webster, Haley Webster, Ralph Morey, and Dr. Ralph Merriman. My mother fondly remembered them all practicing in the living room around the fireplace. Consequently, my mother loved music. May played the piano and R.D. the fiddle. She was also the organist at the Federated Church. I recall a story that Grace Carswell shared once. Her children were sitting in the pew. May was pounding away on the organ, and they were convinced that they saw Beethoven because her hair was flying. As a teacher, eventually teaching in Berkshire, where Stuff and Things is now, she taught music and all subjects. She always mourned the fact that they stopped teaching Latin in school. She directed plays. She even taught them how to play baseball. Ask Mike LaRose, he told me that story. As mentioned earlier, she's one of the founders of the Historical Society, and through that was integral in the 3-day reenactment that I mentioned of the Fenian Raid, which is on the Franklin Historical Society website. It's very grainy, but you can catch it. That was back in, I think, 1959. She wrote the schedule of events, and as one of her grandchildren, if there was ever an error in all 100 copies or however many they had printed, we had to correct each one with a fine felt tip pen that she bought down at the sweet shop. She had a list for the general store and the sweet shop so that she supported both businesses. She was integral in the acquisition and the move of the log cabin, and it was later dedicated to her when they moved it back into the town square area. She also helped with the Historical Society room, which was housed in the basement of the library, which I think they outgrew. R.D. passed away in 1953, and after a few years, the farm stopped being an active farm. May's sister, who was also a teacher, Lou Fullington, came to spend her last years with May. She passed in 67. And R.D.'s sister, who we mentioned before, Aunt Lucille, yet another teacher, a lot of teachers here, she lived with May until her passing in 1979, and May passed in 1986 at the age of 86, just shy of her 87th birthday. She had a great sense of humor, and she knew how to tell a story. Every Thanksgiving, she would wait with glee to engage in political debate with my father's father, Clarence Hull, who lived on the Hannah Road as well. The humor could be matched with a sharp tongue, and that was part of what she was known for. As Bun O'Shea stated in a tribute article after passing, May was a formidable woman. Yet she came here young and alone and adopted Franklin fully as her own. Her energies and love of art and history have graced Franklin for its betterment, and she could not have been more happy to know that this event, a product of this Historical Society, engaging both theater and history. She would have loved it. Thank you.
I could use the little bathroom break. team called the 14U Venom. I've never heard of a softball team called Venom before. I'm used to the little school kids going by with all their ball uniforms on and they stop in for visits. Those baseball, softball uniforms all say Dick Wright Ford. That's the name of a ball team. Dick and Kelly had big hearts, always supporting the community. They especially like to sponsor all the baseball and softball teams. Times are changing though. I think I'll try to reach Dick using this fancy new rotary phone. How about that? We'll just ring him up instead.
I'm honored to be here tonight among these spirits that are here. And don't get me wrong, being a spirit is a great honor. Hello, Dick Wright here. Welcome to town meeting day. I'll call this meeting to order. Oh, it's not town meeting day? Oh. Well, I called the meeting to order, now I can adjourn it. That's what you can do when you're the moderator. And you put me here for 19 years. Thank you for that. Well, I guess I'm just here for a visit. I was born in 1916 in Elkhorn, Nebraska. I was born a Cornhusker until my family moved to Richford, where I was raised. I was the youngest of 6 children. My father died when I was a year and a half. So my mother raised us. We didn't come by wagon train from Nebraska or anything to Richford, but we did venture here. My business career began when I was 16 as a newspaper carrier. My knack for selling began over the years trading horses. Trading horses was a sign of things to come in the transportation business. In the 40s, I moved to Franklin. I worked on the Horskin farm. Moving to Franklin, along with Mary and Kelly, my wife, were the best things I ever did. My love of selling developed even more here in Franklin. Selling cars and building a Ford dealership brick by brick. The business existed from 1946 to 2018. I need to see if I can get some business going here tonight. My inventory seems to be a little light, but that would never stopped me before. Not Dick Wright. Everybody remember the Rolodex? This is my Rolodex. Everybody that ever bought a car from me is on these cards. And I have a suspicion I might need to look at them at some point. My desk when I hit the dealership was much bigger. Shit, I don't know what's What I need to do is contact the customer. I have a customer base. What if everybody knows I'm here? Do they know I'm here? I hope somebody calls me at some point and maybe asks me a question or something. I need to come. Jeez. Hello? Yeah, Dick Wright here. Yeah, the Dick Wright. Yes, of course. Yeah. Who's this? The phone connection's not that great, but that's okay. Tim, it's great to hear from you. Oh, you're looking for a used truck. Let me call you back in a few minutes. I'll take care of you as I always done. Yep. Okay, you want something with around 50,000 miles on it. You're not trading your vehicle in because it's got 250,000 miles on it. Okay. Maybe I can do something. All right? Thank you. Where's my inventory? I got an idea. I kept all this. Here's my Rolodex. Customers, their habits, their buying habits, how they trade. Aha! Bill and it. I'm going to call Bill and his wife Ann. Hi, Bill. Dick Wright here. Yes, the Dick Wright. No. I didn't have any kids. Yes, it's the Dick Wright. Your new truck is here. I know you didn't order a truck, but I see you trade every 4 years according to my Rolodex here. Inventory is tight. I don't want you to miss out on a deal. You know, deals are what car dealerships do. Okay, you're coming down? Thank you. Bill and Ann. She said it didn't take long. Come on over, have a seat. Bill and Ann, have a seat. Did you drive? I put a new truck out. Did you see your new truck? Great. The new one has 4 doors. Your sons are now 11 and 12, right? Okay. They each get their own door and their own window. No more arguments. Oh, you know about trucks, right? This is a truck town. You can sign the paperwork right now and you can drive it home today. You agree? This is a lot easier than I remember. Thank you. Jeez, I don't know why you can't get salesmen to do this. Jeez. Now I'm going to call Jim back. Because I just got to trade him. Now, Jim, I want to let you know I have a used truck that I think will work for you. Okay? Can you come down and look at it? Oh, you're right outside? What do you mean you're right outside? How are you talking to me? I mean, you're at your home with your phone, right? What? Why are you in the phone booth across the street? Are you in the phone booth? No. Oh, you've got a phone in your car. Phone in your car. All right, that's good. All right, I'll see you in a few minutes. Hey, Jim and Sue, have a seat. Glad you came in. Used truck out front is the truck for you. I know you're looking for a used truck. You called me and you told me. I'm glad you already took it for a drive. How did you like it? You know it's a lot of money. Here's what I can do for you. When you come in for your first oil change, I'll change out those rear tires for new ones. There's not much left on them. Be just in time for mud season. So we have a deal then, right? Okay, thank you. You know what, folks? even in Dick Wright's day, he was comfortable saying he loved it when a plan came together. I don't know if it originated with Dick Wright Ford or not. I don't know. You know, coming back to Franklin as a spirit was great. It brought back many memories. My wife and I sitting on our front porch, on warm summer evenings, listening to the sounds of kids playing baseball, which we were glad to support. Living in Franklin and establishing my business, Dick Wright Ford allowed me to support many events in Franklin. The years go by, but the memories never elude me. Even though tonight I am just a spirit, the spirits of Franklin, as you all can see, are active tonight. I see the expansion of the school, and it thrills me. Thank you, taxpayers. By approving this, you are investing in our students in the future. Death and taxes are the only thing for sure in life. And before I return to the spirit world tonight, I have one more thing to do. Chrissy, anybody remember me with Chrissy, my dog? Chrissy and I were together forever, okay? And Chrissy has been with me. And she has expressed a strong desire to stay here in Franklin. A happy dog is a good dog. Chrissy is going home with a child's name I select from the drawing. And there it is. Liza Kittle. Is there Liza Kittle here? Is Liza Kittle here? They were. Okay. It was the Kittles. Okay. The dog will be residing at the Kittle house. And that's really all I have to say, except thank you for having me here tonight. I loved seeing Franklin again. I love what you've done and what you continue to do. Thank you.
Sound or smell takes you back. Like when I smell a Dutch Master cigar, I start looking around for Dick Wright. After Dick and Kelly died, they left some money to help out Franklin. They left some to the Franklin Fire Department, and the Haston Library, and the Franklin United Church. How wonderful. They were always looking out for Franklin. I wonder if I can get my switchboard to get a radio station. I would love to listen to WWSR. I'm sure everybody listens to that every day. And I think Leonard Garrett might be on.
Hi again, everybody. Leonard Parent here, 1420 WWSR Radio in St. Albans. Boy, 89, the summer of 89. It's been a scorcher. Today, July 19th, 10 a.m. in the morning, it's already 75 degrees. In studio, we got a special guest, Franklin's Martha Hannah Toll. She's a newly minted author, and her book is called A History of Franklin. Let's meet her now.
Leonard Parent always gives such good interviews.
Well, thank you, Leonard. The full title is A History of Franklin, Past and Present, Fact or Fancy, Legend or Folksay, 1789 to 1989. This isn't Holy Scripture. What I and so many others have written is a collection of recollections. When you get to be my age, you have a lot of memories. The other challenge is that people think I wrote the book alone. Oh, my days. There were so many of us. May Gates, one of my Franklin High School teachers and a longtime friend, told me about her dream to write a history of the town. She was a pioneer. Some people moved to a commune in the 1960s, and Franklin had one. But May took up the pen. This book was a team effort. Nancy Magnet, Phil Pierce, Dave Sampson, Sue Clark, and Helen Smith all served on the committee. They were a patient, kind, and generous group. When I see what we did, this beautiful, hardbound book I'm so proud of. What a project it was, and not bad for a little town like Franklin. So many friends and neighbors believed in what we were doing. The problem with an interview is I'm the only one up here at the microphone. 23 people put up money to get the book published, not including 2 generous banks and the town, because it doesn't just take time to write a book, it takes money. Years. It was a tough job. I made revisions in the margins, between lines, and used enough arrows that my eyes crossed. Dr. Helen E. Smith took over, sharing her expertise in writing, typing, and computer skills. Suddenly, we had a manuscript, not just a collection of loose pages, some handwritten mixed in with typed ones. Helen helped me knit the book together. And because she was in Cortland, New York, we fattened the mailbags for 2 years. This book is well-traveled, as is Helen, who began her teaching career at the Browns Corner School right here in Franklin. I'm well-traveled too. I was born in Highgate, married in Enosburg, but Franklin is my home. And if my generation didn't write down what we knew and what we learned, so much history would have been lost. The book isn't about me or the committee. It's about how the town came to be. Industry, institutions, events, families, and our lake. There are enough leftovers and loose ends to write supplements, but I'm getting ahead of things. Photographs, fascinating pictures are an important part of the book. Publishing the book was brought them together as a group where they tell a larger, more complete story. The committee didn't just want to write history, they wanted to show history, what our town looked like over the last 200 years, to connect people and places to our past. This book is rooted in family. Many families have been here since Noah. You'll find narrative portraits of unusual citizens and entries for place names. Old Cow is one of my favorites. That's a rock near the island. Oh, the island. There was a folly, a cottage in the middle of the lake. No danger of unexpected visitors. Summer people are important in the book. Many have been coming here for generations. You can see their love of our lake and our community and how they keep their cottages. There's history on those shores. Of course, it leans a bit and shows some wear, but don't we all? Tradition is important in Franklin. We live history. With town meeting day, the fireman's barbecue, the lawn socials on the green, which have been a mainstay since before the Civil War. Which brings to mind Carmine Marsh, a local boy who made it good in business after fighting in the Civil War. He gave that handsome monument on the green. It was cast by Gorham. Just think of it, a Gorham bronze in the town of Franklin. That's the wonder of putting this together, the committee and me, and May, and so many folks who contributed to the book. What was discovered, unearthed. It's not complete. We aren't professional historians. But we created a book that you can reach for when you have questions. You won't find all the answers, but there's enough to get you started. Like the Franklin Fire. Did you know one side of Main Street burned in July of 1925? Today, most of that space is occupied by Dick Wright Ford. Dick is another transplant. He wasn't born here, but made Franklin his home and built his business known throughout New England. Just think of it, so many people and things put our little town on the map. There were great stories here. A local phone exchange, Ruth Tooth, was at the switchboard for decades. You know, Ruth could have written quite a history of Franklin. So much news traveled through the phone lines. Not that any of us listened when the call wasn't for us. I'll never forget the year Hugh Gates put a notice in the March telephone bills asking the people to put a paper bag over their phones on April 1st because Franklin Telephone was going to blow the dust out of the lines. I have friends who put bread bags over their phones the night before because they didn't want dirt on their wallpaper. Being the town clerk gave me a head start with this history. I knew the people, the places, and far more than I could tell, or should tell. What's not in the book is just as interesting as what is. But this isn't a tabloid. It was written to evoke and remember, not to shame. If you haven't bought a book, please do. And if you'd like a dedication, I have a couple of good pens in my handbag because just one won't be enough to keep up with the demand. It's an exciting, humbling thing to see this book, and I know how many people worked hard to make it possible. I wish they were all here to see it, but at least their stories will live on. If anyone out there is still listening, thank you. I enjoyed being your guest. Radio is an interesting thing, allowing us to be in places we really aren't. Moving information at a speed I never could have imagined. Here I am, an 82-year-old widow, 3 times a great-grandmother, my voice traveling through the air. Isn't this world a wonder? What will they think of next?
Quite a book. I'm even mentioned in here for a page or two. I just had a birthday. I'm 129 years old. I was born up in Cook's Corner in Quebec, just across the border. And then as a child, I moved back to Franklin with my family. My mother, Millie, is sister to Olin Benjamin's mother. Olin and I are first cousins. We don't see each other very much. He lives all the way across the lake, has a wife and 4 children. and he's quite busy running a business. But he always has time to visit with family. I'm going to ring him up.
Hot one at the mill today. Jeffrey, add 6 more 4x4, 8-foot long posts to that Gates barn order. And after you're done, check the order twice, and even a third time. We don't want that mistake like you made the other last week. When you run a business, you got to keep a tight rein on your employees. Jeff missed an important piece of lumber last week. It put us behind in the next order. Money is time, and time is money. Oh, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Olin Kenneth Benjamin. I was born in 1909. I lived in East Franklin. My parents, Mitty and Elizabeth, had moved from Quebec just a few years beforehand and wanted to raise their family on a farm. So they purchased a farm in East Franklin. I had 7 brothers and 1 sister. My sister died at a very young age. One of my brothers, Irving, died in a snow plowing accident. This was hard on my mother. As a child, I attended the East Franklin one-room schoolhouse, which I understand now is someone's house on Scott Road, where Annette Favreau lives. Farm chores, milking cows, mucking the barn and cleaning it up, and haying in the summer. Boy, that was terrible work to do. But as a teenager, I fell in love with the local blacksmith's daughter, Abby White. And so we married as teenagers, and we had 4 children: Elizabeth, Madeline, Stuart, and Sylvia. The thing about raising kids when you're young is you grow up with the kids too. Well, Elizabeth married kind of young. Her name was Betty. She married the local joker in town, Gilbert Dewey. My, was her life adventurous and full of laughter. I heard, though, that she died last year at 92. And Gilbert died of a broken heart just a few months later. Sylvia married a hard worker and one of the best-looking guys in town, Jim Messier. He was a farmer, too, and I heard that he started to teach at Missisquoi Valley Union High School and has been teaching there for over 50 years. I'm sad to say that Sylvia died at 45 because of diabetes and a heart attack. My other daughter, Madeline, died at 77, and she was a founding member of the Franklin Historical Society. My first occupation was a farmer, but I also had some guinea hens and rabbits. But I soon found that you don't make a lot of money being a farmer. So I purchased a sawmill. It was helping local farmers like the Magnets, the Rainvilles, the Messiers, and the Dewings. They all needed lumber. Even farmers from Sheldon came, and Highgate, and Enosburg, and as far away as Montgomery. They'd bring me their logs, and I'd cut them up for lumber. And even a few people from Lake Carmike came to me to have their lumber cut. Well, one day Jim Racine brought me a load of logs. He put them in the wrong spot, and I told him where to put those logs. I was known around town as having a little rough around the edges, and it kind of upset some people. You know what I say? Diamonds are rough around the edges, but I don't hear anybody complaining about them. During the winter, I couldn't run the mill because it was too cold, so I had my own wood shop. I'd go out there with my lathe and I'd make tool handles, baseball bats for the grandchildren. Even made beehives. And at one point I started making furniture. I actually made this stool that I'm sitting on, and it's at one of my grandson's house right now. I also had this other name people call me, Cash Benjamin. Let me tell you about this. I was in my 20s, and the stock market fell. And then the nation was in this depression for 10 years. It was hard to raise our family, but we survived. Well, I learned my lesson. You can't trust the banks. So I carried my own money, all of my money. Nothing was in the bank, and I knew where it was. It was safe all the time. The other thing I learned about money is pay with cash. Don't take credit, like people did down at that Oscar Riley General Store. And whenever I went to Dick Wright Ford, he was always trying to sell me a truck. But I wouldn't buy it until I had all the cash in my pocket ready to pay for that truck. A few years after the Depression, I can recall it. It was a brisk winter day. I was out hunting rabbits with my beagle. We came back home and hung up my hat, hung up my coat, put another log on the fire, and fed the dog. Abby, she was in the kitchen, cooking dinner. I thought I'd turn on the radio and listen to my favorite broadcast of Amos and Andy. When all of a sudden, out of the blue, we interrupt this program for an important news bulletin. Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor. Abby, did you hear? Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor. We left the radio on all night. We heard that next day, President Roosevelt had declared war on Japan. He said this day will go down in infamy. If you happen to visit the green in the town here, you'll see a list of 57 men who fought not only in Japan but in Europe. One of those men listed in there is my youngest brother, Richard Benji. It affected everybody in town, in the community, and the nation. I remember another day, just like it was yesterday. November 22nd, 1963. I was out in the mill, late in the mid-afternoon. I was working hard, and all of a sudden I could see Abby running down the hill. Ollie, Ollie, Ollie! I couldn't quite hear her, so I hit the kill switch on the machine. I could see something was wrong in her face, and she said, President Kennedy has been assassinated. What? No, it can't be. I told my workers to take off and leave for the day because some things are more important than making a buck. I went back home and turned on my RCA black and white television and adjusted the rabbit ears and listened to the news the whole night long. I was a man of daily routine. Some things interrupt that routine, but I was a man of routine. Breakfast at 7, dinner at 12, and supper at 5. One of my grandkids, Jimmy Dewing, he knew that we ate dinner at 5. He'd ride his bike down from his house and he'd eat dinner with us. And he'd go back home and his parents didn't understand why he wasn't hungry. Well, there was always work still to do at the mill, even after supper. This one night I wasn't feeling quite myself, but I still had to get that last bit of cleaning up before the next day. Jeffrey was with me and we went out to clean up the slabs, and I came back home, got out of the truck, stepped out, and I died. Jeffrey was there with me. That was back in 1982. I'm buried in the East Franklin Cemetery with my parents and some of my other family relatives. You can go see that yourself. You'll have to excuse me. I have to go check that order that Jeff's working on. So thank you for coming.
There was quite the lumber mill that Olin had. I wonder how many homes and businesses he had cut lumber for. It's always good to hear from family. It's interesting how many folks in Franklin are related. Sure, there's a few I don't even know are related. Look, Martha Toll. Martha Toll is cousin to Frida Powers. Frida grew up on the Middle Road. Then she moved away. She was a teacher out of town for a while, and then she moved back. She always has good stories to tell. I'll see if I can get hold of Frida.
Hello?
Frida?
Hello?
right there.
Makes her forever.
Oh my. Well, this is lovely. Yes. I didn't know there'd be so many. Oh, there's a podium there. I wonder what I'm supposed to do with that. Oh, never mind. Yes. Ruth announced me. I am Frida Elnora, that was for my grandmother, Powers. Yes, I was born July 27th, 1907, and I died April 10th, 1999. Yes. Oh, Ruth, do you remember there used to be a cedar hedge running right down the center of the cemetery in town?
Yes.
The Catholics were buried on the left near the church. The Protestants were buried on the right. Well, I've noticed the hedge is now gone, and we seem to be getting along just fine.
Where did they put the sinners?
Oh, Ruth, you know there are no sinners in Franklin. Now, my earliest descendant, Joel Powers, settled in Huntsburg in 1806. Yeah, well, we all know that Thomas Jefferson was in the White House. You did know that, right? Oh, okay. Yes. Now, Huntsburg was the name originally of Franklin. And on October 25th, 1817, Huntsburg was changed to Franklin. Thank you. Very nice. Oh, there was something about folks wanting Franklin to be the county seat. That seemed to be the reason for the requested change. Now, Joel Powers settled on what is now the Middle Road on 164 acres. He cleared the land and made ash, which he sold to dealers in Montreal, and then they shipped the potash to London, where it was made into soap and sheep dip. Very nice. Now, Joel Powers was my grandfather. He didn't keep cows, but he did work on a mill which was located on the property that is now owned by Doug and Sue Clark. Yes. Now, my grandfather's name was Edward, and he was born in 1828. Now, he was a farmer and a fruit grower, yes, and he did have a herd of 30 Jersey cows. But we all know they're the best. They may not produce the most milk, but they certainly produce the most cream. Yes. Anyway, now my grandfather had a very large collection of Indian relics, which he found along Lake Carmi, and they were left there by the St. Francis Indians who came from Canada. Yes, he also had a collection of bottles. You would never guess how many bottles he had. I know because some of those bottles are still at my house. Yes, a man used to come up from New York, and my grandfather, and he would talk for hours about bottles. Can you think of a more exciting subject? Well, if you didn't know it, if you had a lady's leg bottle, then you went online, as they do nowadays, you would have discovered that that bottle was worth $1,200. There. Oh, there's my house. my lovely old house that I lived in for 85 years. I sold it in 1994 to a nice young man who I understand has since renovated it. He did ask me at Ave Maria if I ever wanted to go and see the house. And I said, no, like Thomas Wolfe said, you never can go home again. And I didn't. And I finished my days at Ave Maria. Now, my father's name was Warren, and he was married to a lady named Alma, and that was my mother, and they had 3 children. There was Morris, and Hester, and me. Well, Hester unfortunately died at a very young age of the whooping cough. So there was just Morris and me. I forgot to mention, Morris and his wife, Ruby Jones, well, she was from Enosburg, was buried right next to me in lot 201. So I'm assuming they're in 202 or 203. I don't know which way it goes over there anymore. Let's see, what else do I have? Now, there is a very funny story about my father. A neighbor once asked my father, when he was in his late 70s, what he attributed his old age to. And he said, no strong drink, no tea, no coffee, and I never talk about my neighbors, and walked on down the road. That was my father. Now, I have taught school for 39 years. First year, I taught at the Hammond School off State Park Road, and then I taught in South Franklin, I taught in Georgia, but I spent 19 years in Underhill. The truth is, folks, I didn't want to be a teacher. I just didn't like children. Especially those little ones. They were so noisy, I guess you say. That was a nice way of putting it, yes. But my mother wanted always to be a teacher. So she was determined that her daughter was going to be a teacher. Now, mother, as we all know, if you can remember your mother, some of them are sitting in the audience, I'm sure, can be very determined. Now, when I graduated from Franklin High School, I wanted to go to business college. I wanted to be a business person, a secretary, not a teacher with all those little kids. But my father said there wasn't enough money around, and so guess what? I went off to teachers college. It was all right when you come right down to it. Actually, I got to where I really liked teaching, and I don't think I would ever have done anything else. But back to my mother. My mother wanted, being the only girl, wanted me to be a lady. Oh, there's my desk going away from me. This must be a new contraption they've invented. Well, all right. Anyway. She was so determined that I was going to be a lady. Though we lived on the farm, on the middle road, I was never allowed to go to the barn. I never did chores. I never mucked out the gutters. I never carried milk. No. I was taught to do ladylike things. You know, sweep the floor, make clothes, cook. You know, all in preparation, I guess, for later life. Anyway, while I was at Teachers College, we had a class. And in those days, I didn't have a yearbook. I had an autograph book. And if you look at the front of my autograph book, it says, property of Frida E. Powers, July 7th, 1926. Now, I would like to read some of these witty comments. Well, there are 20 or 30 in here. I'm only going to do 3. But one of my favorites is, love many, trust few, always paddle your own canoe. That was my classmate, Helen Russell. Oh, and then Dorothy Hemingway wrote, "A wise old owl lived in an oak. The more he saw, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard." Why can't we be like that old bird? And a very witty one from Richard Glidden. Anybody here know Richard Glidden? Anyway, he wrote this one. "The older the tree, the tougher the bark. The older the girl, the harder to spark." All right. I did teach, as I said, for 39 years, and I could keep you here all night telling you teacher stories. Believe it or not, some very interesting ones happen. I'll tell you just one. There was this little girl fighting on the playground. I brought her in, I sat her down, and I said, "Okay, what's all this about?" Before she said a word, she bent over and bit me right on the hand. Well, I said, "You get your things together and you go home and you tell your mother, and don't you come back until you bring your mother." Next morning, her mother came and said, "Now tell Miss Powers that you're sorry." And the little girl looked at me and said, "I'm sorry." Well, I know she didn't mean it, but she did, after all, say she was sorry. Now, many years later, I was coming home from church, and a car pulled up in front of the house, and a young lady and her husband got out. And we sat and chatted for a while, and I thought, I think I know this girl. And I said, "You wouldn't happen to be the girl who hit me?" "Oh, yes, Miss Powers, I was, and I'm so sorry, I am so sorry. I hope you can forgive me. Do you forgive me?" And I said, "Oh, my dear, that is long forgotten." And she went home with a clear mind. Well, the hour does grow late. Oh, my goodness, it certainly does. And at 92, I need my rest. But before I return to Lot 201, I'm going to wander through the town and see how things are going. There's new owners at the general store. I hear we have a new librarian at Haston Library, Josh Warman. And then, oh yes, I noticed Dick Ford's sign is gone. All you can do is, the lettering on the wall, you can still see it. But a nice young man from Richford now runs this car dealer. Well, it's not a dealership, it's just a garage now. But I'll tell you, the one thing about dying is what? 2 things promised to you. What are they? Death and taxes. By golly, you all have a pleasant evening, and thank you so much for visiting our little town. Bye.
Rock of ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. Let the water and the blood from thy
the labors of my hands can fulfill thy lost demands. Could my zeal no respite know? Could my tears forever flow? All for sin could not atone. Thou must save, and thou alone. Nothing in my hand I bring, simply to thy cross I cling. Naked come to thee for dress, helpless look to thee for grace. Foul I to the fountain fly, wash me,